I got to admit, I'm a big Sam Mitchell fan, and one of the things I've always admired about him is the healthy sense of confidence he's got about himself. He's always had it. That belief in his ability shone through across his brilliant 329 games and 4 premierships as a player. Which other AFL player would dare to kick on their opposite foot from a set shot 45 metres out directly in front? Mitchell did. And it hasn't diminished as a coach. Mitchell was thrust into the Hawthorn top job prematurely. This upcoming season was supposed to be his first at the helm, but after Alistair Clarkson's messy exit was fast-tracked in 2021 under the influence of former President Jeff Kennett, Mitchell stepped up. That confidence hasn't deserted him when he took his seat behind the glass in the coach's box. He's been nothing but impressive. Mitchell's Hawks won 3 of the first 5, including an away-from-home smashing of last year's prelim finalist Port Adelaide in round 2 and a victory against the Premiers Geelong in round 5. The Mitchell game plan is fast, it's attacking. They move the ball from defence with dare and speed. They're a joy to watch. But due to a void of talent in the midfield, largely due to Clarkson's past sins of not having belief in the draft and trading away key picks, Mitchell was forced to throw the magnets around in the engine room. Brownlow medalist Tom Mitchell was forced to half forward, while the youthful legs of Ward, Newcombe, Day and Nash made the most of the extra midfield responsibility. Like Clarkson previously, the new Hawthorn coach showed he wasn't beholden to reputations or afraid of making a hard call. This was solidified during the end of season list changes. Tom Mitchell, O'Meara, Gunston, Shields, McAvoy, all gone. Coach Mitchell explained the strategy with surety and his typical confidence. What that means is we now have got what I would say is a great core of premiership players right in front of us. Rather than going to the next draft and the next trade thinking we need to find premiership players now, I think the vast majority of our premiership players are sitting right here. All we need to do is look for little bits and pieces to add to this group, Mitchell said last night. And after a bitter and nasty campaign, Andy Gowers was last night named the new president of the Hawks, and the fallout to his appointment continued today with former captain Richie Vandenberg quitting on the back of the election result. Vandenberg and Kennett were massive Mitchell supporters and were instrumental in the sacking of Clarkson. Now they're gone. Hawthorn hasn't played a final since 2018, and it's 12 months into an extensive rebuild, but Mitchell already sees most pieces of the next Hawthorn Premiership puzzle in their proper place. Despite his optimism, he would surely know that the next 3 to 4 seasons are going to be tough. There will be many more losses than wins. With his fierce allies Vandenberg and Kennett gone and a new president and board in place, he's going to have to hope the new board has as much confidence in him as he has in himself. Gerard, rebuilding coaches don't often survive longer than 5 years. I personally hope Hawthorn have more patience with Mitchell.
I don't think there's any question they're on the one page. Andy Gower is very strong in his views that they're on the same page, that this has been a club decision to rejuvenate. Clearly, Sam was of that mindset last year, and he went again with it this year. I think they did extremely well last year to win, 8 games, I think, in the finish. Yeah. Some extraordinary, great start, really. I mean, you mentioned the game against Port Adelaide, and I think they knocked over Geelong too.
They did, yeah.
As you said. So their upside is really good. They'll have some flat spots, particularly if they get some injuries. But gee, I like the 2 guys they got in the draft. Lloyd Meek is, I think, one that's been sitting over in the West for a couple of years. I've seen him more than most, given that I used to go there a hell of a lot. I think he's a player that will step up and hopefully become a force in the ruck. And a lot of clubs will be looking at him and saying, why didn't we go for him? Josh Weddle, he looks like a ready-made player as well that they picked up, I think, about pick 16 or 17. He was sitting there with the Swans.
They traded up to get him.
That's right.
Yeah.
So I like where they're going, the Hawks. I mean, I'm not a fan of the total
rebuild.
I think it can be difficult, but I think in some respects they were left with no other option because Sam, I think, had made the case the previous week. He'd already essentially made it clear that Tom Mitchell wasn't part of the future the way he was playing him last year. So wasn't surprised to see him get out. I think he'll end up having a great finish to his career at Collingwood. Gunston's going to be the big loss for mine because it's hard to win games without putting goals on the board.
Yeah, so I did a lot of radio with David King this year, and he was big on the fact that rebuilding coaches don't
Yeah.
often they don't last. And he had the stats to back it up, and it was quite confronting to see it. Now this is as savage a rebuild as you are going to see, and the reason I speak about this is because Kennett and Vandenberg were such fierce Mitchell allies. Now Sam said last night they've been really clear. 14 or 15 months ago they came up with a strategy about how to build our next Premiership era. I see some potential greatness in him as a coach. Now, how would you know? You're 1 year in, but there's been some signs. Love the resume that he's built and the career path he's been on to get there. I just hope they have more patience than, say, North Melbourne had with David Noble and many, many other rebuilding coaches before him. Hawks fans, 1-300.
I don't think you can compare. I mean, we tend to throw all these guys in the one basket. But Sam Mitchell's pedigree as a player gets him a bit more. I think what he's done on the field straight away. 8 wins last year. He knows how to coach. He's been, I don't
think it's going to be 8 this year, though. I think it's going to get really rough.
It may go backwards at St Kilda as well. But I think committees are smarter too. We're getting smarter, and it's a lot easier to sell Sam Mitchell than it is to sell others that have been tipped out.
Let's catch up with one of the senior reporters on afl.com.au. Josh Gabelich is his name. Josh, thanks so much for your time.
Great to be with you, Kane. G'day, Gerard. Hope you're going well.
Good, Josh. I'm going well. We're more important about not how you're going, but where you've been.
Well, Gerard, I've been to 8 of the 10 Victorian clubs in the last month, and I reckon it's rained at every pre-season session I've been to so far. So today we were out at Carlton for most of the day, and tell you what, I don't know if you've been out to the new facility at Icon Park, but it's absolutely amazing. So I highly recommend. They had their open day today and plenty of people on the track. So they just about finished their pre-Christmas block and plenty going on, plenty of new faces.
So do you see them as Premiership contenders?
I definitely do. I think when you consider they didn't play finals this year, but if you look at the fixture that came out last week, I reckon they've got a pretty favourable fixture at this point of the year. It's obviously always difficult to project. They've got a really healthy list at the moment, apart from one name, which is causing a little bit of concern, and that's Sam Walsh, although it is only December, so no need to hit the panic button.
What is the problem there? Is it still his foot?
It's his back. So if we think back to round 23, he was at laid out, really laid out, and we're 4 months on, and there's still no real time frame around his return. They haven't had any surgery or anything like that. Hasn't trained with the main group yet. I think he'll get back sort of January, February, but starting to get a little bit closer to round 1. Still 90-odd days away, so plenty of time, but there's a little bit of concern.
The old physiotherapy therapist is coming at me. Do we know what's wrong with his back?
Just an ongoing soreness. So no disc, or they're definitely not looking at a surgery option.
No epidural?
Not to my knowledge, Gerard, but they're really confident in the way. If you think back to the start of the year, that syndesmosis in February, and they thought he missed the first month, and he missed the one game and came back and played really well. So they're still really confident. He only needs about a month to really get going heading into the new year. But there's just a little bit of concern because there's no time frame around his return at this stage.
Any other concerns in the injury ward?
Well, George Hewitt, he had back surgery at the end of the season, but he's just starting to transition back. So he's a plus, and so is Matt Kennedy, who had a Liz Frank injury at the end of the year. He had surgery too. He's starting to transition back. The other concern, I would say, is Pitnet. He's coming back from a PCL reconstruction and still a little bit off. So if you think about their list, I reckon the ruck is probably the spot where they're lacking depth. So that's probably a slight concern on Pitnet. But I think, like Sam Walsh, he should be good to go by round 1. But they're the two injury concerns right now. McGovern's up and training. He was training today. Bit of a different session Wednesdays that people do sort of individual programs. He trained away from the main group for some of the session along with Adam Chera. But they're pretty happy with how he's going. The one I reckon you might be interested in is Zach Williams. Obviously, 2 pretty disappointing years at the Blues, but they're wrapped with the way his first month of the pre-season has been. Obviously, we barely saw him this year. He had that really serious calf injury, came back for the last game of the season, but he's had a really strong start to the summer. It is only December, so we'll see how he goes after Christmas. But
where's he going to play?
I think he might settle back on a half-back flank. They've looked at him through the midfield, but when we consider what they did last trade period with Chera and with George Hewitt, I think there's a spot for him rather down at half-back rather than through the midfield. So time will tell. We'll keep an eye on that during the match simulation, which will kickstart, I reckon, late January.
We love a father-son, and Carlton are fortunate they've got twins coming through, the Camporelli twins, age 16. Did you witness them at training today, and how much did they do, and how did they look?
Well, Kane, for the first half an hour, I'm trying to work out who are these two really, really skinny kids on the track, because we were out there from 8 o'clock and quickly found out that they were the two Camporelli boys, Lucas and Ben, and they've spent the week training with the Blues, and spoke to Luke Power afterwards, and there's a bit of excitement around them because they had a really good under-16 carnival for South Australia, so they're not eligible father-son for another couple of years, but pretty awesome to see Camporelli's back at Princes Park. So there's a bit of excitement around them. They spent a lot of the sessions around Patrick Cripps and even kicking at Charlie Curnow and Harry Mackay late in the session, so great to see.
Oh, it's brilliant. They're a couple of South Australian boys, so to be flown over for a week is magnificent from a great family. Hey, where else you been? You spent some time with Craig McRae and you were down at the Magpies?
Yeah, I was down at Collingwood on Monday, and obviously a pretty significant day for Collingwood. We got wind that they were considering announcing this leadership change on Monday, and they went ahead with it later in the day, and pretty big when you consider that Scott Pendlebury's been at the helm for 9 years, 206 games record holder at the club. I thought this would be something they consider, given he's going to turn 35 early in the new year, and they've put the trigger on it pretty early, so they're going to give themselves the best part of 3 months to find a replacement. And I think they've got a handful of really good options to consider, and I think it might just extend Scott Pendlebury's career because he's got a year to go, and I think he's got more than a year to go in terms of the football he played this year. He came second in the best and fairest and played 24 games, so he could push and reach that 400-game milestone. So plenty to look at in the leadership front across the summer at the Pies.
We've given him the 400. We're questioning whether or not he can get to Boomer Harvey.
I think he gets to 400. I think he does get to 400 because he's at 358, 42 games. He doesn't miss too many games and looks after himself extremely well. So you definitely couldn't rule it out, could you, Gerard?
No, I've given him the 4. I'm not sure about Boomer Harvey, though, but I reckon he gets to 400. And it'll be an unbelievable career. Well, it's already an unbelievable career, but just goes to show how professional the game has become when you can knock out 400 games.
Absolutely. And at the Pies at the moment, they do have some injury concerns, a bit like Carlton with Darcy Moore and Jordan Ngoe spending time in hospital last week. There's no concern around round one, but they aren't training at the moment. They're expected to come back early in the new year. But Darcy Moore's a slight concern because a bone infection was very serious. They got onto it quite early, but there's just no strong timeline around his return. They do think it'll be sort of mid to late Jan. It's not the end of the world at this time of year, but not absolutely ideal, especially when you consider he's probably one of the leading candidates to replace Scott Pendlebury.
Are they largely doing the same sort of training, Josh? I mean, you said you've been to 8 clubs. Are they all copying each other and doing the same, or are there some different intricacies at each club?
Well, I'll tell you what, Kane, we were down in Geelong last week for day one of the pre-season, and they didn't get going until 2:30 in the afternoon. Day one of the pre-season, very different to other programs around the competition. We were at GMHBA Stadium for the first half of the day, and it was extremely casual. Coffees and lunches and stopping for photos with fans, but that's what they've been like all year. So no surprises there. Other clubs are up and going the crack of dawn at the start of the sessions. I found it interesting at Collingwood on Monday that they have Monday's pressure day, and Justin Leppich runs pressure day, and it's a pretty intense day. So there are some differences across the clubs. We're out at Richmond tomorrow, and they train on Thursdays, and Hawthorn, I think, are the only other club that train on Thursdays, so they have a really big session on a Thursday. So I'm looking forward to getting down there and seeing Jacob Hopper and Tim Taranto and how they're fitting in.
Good on you, mate. Thanks so much for the update.